Welcome. Welcome to this space, to this time, set aside to honor the life of Catherine Squire Lyon. The sorrow and joy of life weave a tapestry of our individual lives as death gathers us in community. To bid one we have known and loved farewell and adieu. To search for life's deepest meanings, and to seek the comfort and healing people offer to one another. At this time, we are united with the wisdom and customs of all people in all ages. Through our own sense of strength and resources, we feel the embrace of the ageless human community. And it is in this spirit we join our individual feelings and thoughts as well as faiths that sustain us separately into a harmony of remembrance and affirmation. We shall celebrate Catherine's living, and we shall grieve her dying, because we know the truth of William Blake's words. Joy and woe are woven fine, under every grief and pine runs a joy with silken twine. It is right, it should be so. We are made for joy and woe. Let us gather this afternoon to remember and celebrate the life of Catherine Squire Lyon. A human life is sacred. It is sacred in its being born, it is sacred in its living, and it's sacred in its dying. As Catherine was a beloved member of this church, and one of the many ways we acknowledge the sacredness is through lighting our chalice. It is with this sacredness in mind we light our chalice today in honor of the sacred human life of Catherine Squire Lyon.
Cathy was born Catherine Squire on November the 23rd, 1928. She grew up with her parents, Edwin and Winifred, and her brother, Edwin Jr., in Long Beach, California. The family were great nature lovers and often enjoyed camping holidays together. Sometimes they'd go camping in Yosemite. And Cathy remembered how her mother, in a house dress, would cook their meals in the tent. Winifred, like many women in the 1920s, was expected to be a homemaker. Cathy's father was an engineer, and his influence became very important to Cathy as she grew older. Cathy had a natural love of music and was taking piano lessons when, at the age of 7, she contracted polio. Her life, as it had been, was stopped short. She had to spend the next year in hospital. Then, with courage and determination, the 8-year-old Cathy began learning to use crutches. Later, she had braces, then a walker, struggling all the while to get well again. Perhaps it was through this experience Cathy grew up to have such a great optimism and determination, which enabled her to live a full, active, and very long life. Perhaps it was also this experience which gave Cathy enormous empathy for anyone whose life was challenged. After graduating from high school, Cathy went to Pomona College in Claremont, California, majoring in chemistry. Cathy graduated from college in 1950 and moved with a group of Pomona woman friends to San Francisco. Here she got a job with the University of California, San Francisco, where she would remain for the rest of her career. To begin with, Cathy worked as a lab assistant at the eye clinic, the Proctor Institute. Later, she moved into information technology, supporting UCSF administration and financial systems. During these early years of computers, Cathy was truly a pioneer woman in the field of IT. But Cathy was not only a scientist, she was a fun-loving and adventurous friend who loved traveling through Europe. And in the United States, Cathy would drive all over the place, but often down to Southern California to visit family and friends. Frequently, she'd try to take a side trip en route to go bird watching or to see the wildflowers in the spring. Perhaps it was around this time that Cathy developed an interest in genealogy. She was able to trace her family back to the earliest days of America and further to England. Cathy loved all things British: history, memoirs, fiction, theater, and, as she told me later, she loved the British accent. In 1961, Cathy married Carlton Lyon. Though he had been in the military, Cathy's great friends, the Chabatonis, described him as being unlike what we think is typical of the military. Carlton was gentle, charming, a highly intelligent man. At one point, Cathy and Carlton were living in the Hunters Point area of San Francisco. They noticed many children around and in the streets. They began to invite them in for a snack or to help them with homework. They made friends with some of these children. Carlton and Cathy shared many interests. They had a lot of joy in their life together. After they'd moved to the Sunset, Cathy and Carlton were divorced. though they remained good friends until his death in 1995. Afterwards, Cathy remained in touch with Carlton's family, including nieces Jean and Elizabeth Lyon. Cathy had many family members in Southern California where her grandparents had lived. Cathy's brother Edwin had lived down there with his wife and 2 children, Allison and Rick. Cathy later in her life grew very close to Rick, and they would telephone each other frequently until his early death. Cathy also kept in touch with Allison and loved to see photographs of her growing family of grandchildren. Here in San Francisco, Cathy moved now to the house on Rockdale Avenue where she lived for the rest of her life. Cathy often spoke of how much pleasure she got from her house, her garden, the flowers, and the birds. Oh, how she loved her birds. Cathy appreciated good food. She liked to cook herself and to bake. Though her efforts at knitting and crocheting gave her more amusement than pleasure, she said. Over the years, she'd had several cats as pets. Many of us knew how active Cathy was, both socially and culturally. She greatly enjoyed the opera and concerts at the Conservatory of Music. Cathy also loved theater and often traveled with friends up to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I think many of us knew Cathy was a great reader. But did you also know she took cello lessons as an adult just for her own enjoyment? So many people have told me what a good friend Cathy was. She kept up friendships from all the different stages of her life. She had a San Francisco group of friends who called themselves the Jock Club. They were athletic supporters, they agreed, not players. But basically what they did was to meet for meals, celebrations, and just to have fun together. Through this group, Cathy became very good friends with Al and Kathy Chabatoni. Her Pomona friends group called themselves the Sage Chicks, the school mascot being the Sage Hens, and she kept up with the Sage Chicks too. But she kept up with so many people. Cathy was part of a Facebook group, a post-polio group, a financial planning group, and so many other groups. Cathy seemed to want to be around people. When she retired in the 1980s, Cathy intentionally sought a community and found this church. She attended for a while and then became a member in 1990. Cathy volunteered as a receptionist here. In the late 1990s, I remember Cathy sitting at the front desk where there would be people coming and going, telephones ringing, questions, notes, packages delivered, and should something go wrong, which it sometimes did, I can still hear Cathy saying, "Well, how about that?" in a way that diffused the moment. It was wonderful. Cathy quickly became integrated into the life of the church. She joined the End Zone group of retired people companioning each other in aging well. She joined the Society for Community Work, a philanthropic organization of the church, which held monthly luncheons with a speaker on some topic of social concern. Cathy really enjoyed these lunches and meeting her friends there. In 2015, Cathy joined a church book club whose members described themselves as bookworms. They enjoyed lively discussions in which Judith Stoddart, a member of the group, told me Cathy fully participated with insightful comments, critiques, and humor. Cathy, as many of us know, had always been extremely self-sufficient, and in later years later years prided herself in organizing her life so she could continue to drive with her wheelchair in the car, to shop, to visit friends, to go places. But slowly, over the months and years, Cathy began to realize she needed some help. Ken Keep, a church member, began doing things around the house and garden, sometimes driving Cathy, and they became good friends. Cathy was bereft when Ken died unexpectedly early. About 2 years ago, Cathy broke her leg, weakened by polio, she told me. When she was in rehab, her friend and neighbor, Cathy Chabatoni, would bring what she needed from home, her mail. But most importantly, Cathy brought companionship, and they became like sisters, as she told me. Another friend from church, Sharon Smith, would also help Cathy and visit her. Sharon said how much Cathy appreciated beauty and things looking nice. Talking with people before this service, I was amazed to discover how many people visited Cathy, loved to visit Cathy. Even before she broke her leg a second time, Cathy realized she needed at-home help. After contacting Alex Duran, it was arranged that Ivan Espinoza would be the primary caregiver for Cathy. So for the past 18 months, Ivan provided Cathy with kind, respectful care, while, as Cathy said, keeping some fun in her life. That mattered to her. Ivan took over the driving, and they would go on trips, out to lunch or down the coast or visit to Stowe Lake in the park, and Ivan's little dog, Lobby, providing much of the fun for Cathy on those trips. It was a pleasure to hear what Ivan had arranged for Cathy's days. Wake up at 7 o'clock with a cup of coffee, then breakfast of omelette, ham, avocado, and so on through the day, pleasurable, healthy meals. Until around 5 p.m., Cathy would have a glass of wine before supper. Cathy enjoyed Ivan's company. She liked that he was funny and told jokes, and she loved to hear him play the guitar. Ivan and Alex are no means alone in stressing what a happy person Cathy was. She did not complain. Even in the wheelchair, she did not show frustration or anger, but humor. Cathy Chabatoni described Cathy as, quote, fiercely independent, strong, a wicked sense of humor, upbeat and friendly. I would say Cathy was all of that and more. After a short stay in the hospital, Cathy died on December the 18th, 2023. In our remembering of Cathy, let us give thanks for all her life showed us. The practice of being aware of the wonder of each day, the ability to accept and enjoy differences, the gift of humor to buoy us, and the faith that love is at the heart of life. As you're willing and able, I invite you to stand and we will join in singing hymn number 318 in the gray hymnal, We Would Be One.
Thank you, Margot, for those beautiful words and memories. What Reverend Margot has shared with us is only a snapshot of Catherine's life. I would like to invite others to broaden this view with their own memories. And we have certain speakers that have been selected for today. And for this morning, or for this afternoon, we're going to start with Laura Selway Sanchez. Okay. Oh, my. Sorry. Oh, you're fine. Would you like me to hold the microphone? Would you like to hold it?
I think it'd be good for you to hold it. I better hold on to this.
I can do that for you.
Hello. I'm Laura Selway Sanchez, and I met Cathy. We both grew up in Long Beach, and I met Cathy when our two piano teachers had monthly recitals at my teacher's house, and Cathy would laboringly walk up the 3 steps to the platform where the piano was, and she'd play her piece. This was those students, when they had a piece that they had learned, memorized, and all, then they would perform at the monthly recital. So we didn't perform every month, but it was a tradition, and just not this many people, just a small group of parents or relatives would come to hear us. And I met Cathy there. Probably we were in junior high. And then because we lived in different parts of Long Beach, we went to different schools, and I didn't see her anywhere else until we both ended up at Pomona College, both chemistry majors. Well, she lasted the course. I wimped out about half a semester in, changed to psychology. And one of the highlights of my time and in college with Cathy was one spring break. She had a car, and I don't remember whether she had it all the time or whether she borrowed the family car, but we drove up to San Francisco for spring break, and we stopped in Carmel to visit with one of our classmates, Gene Edmonds, later Gene Edmonds Courtham, and we stayed in a motel that was made out of a railroad car. So that was fun. And then in San Francisco, we stayed at the home, which was like an apartment in a high-rise building. There was the home of one of our classmates, Cathy Clark. And they had arranged for some young men that they knew to take us on dates. And so our date was to go to the Fairmont Hotel, dancing. Then we went across the street and up the elevator to the top of the Mark to see the view. We were too young. We were under 21, which was the drinking age then. We were too young to have a drink. And then we went to hear a band in a bar. It was a Dixieland jazz band, and it was a long, thin bar, and they played across the bar on the thin direction, and it was so loud, but we felt so grown up. It was just really fun. And then after Pomona, when we graduated, a number of us women, and some men too, moved to San Francisco. Well, I came to San Francisco. I didn't move here yet, but I came to finish the teaching credential courses that I needed that I couldn't get at Pomona. And I went to San Francisco State, and at that time, San Francisco State was across the street from the Mint. And I don't know where the Mint is now, but it's wherever it was. And anyway, I ended up getting an emergency credential teaching job in Richmond and taught kindergarten and learned that I possibly wasn't cut out to be a teacher. And I tried it another year and confirmed that I'm not cut out to be a teacher. And Cathy got her job at UUSF hospital, working in the lab, and I think she stayed there. I said that wrong. Whatever. UCSF. I got the letters mixed up. Anyway, I think she stayed there her whole career. And there were other Pomona people up here. Kay Bulkley, later Phillips, was one of those people. I think somebody here knew Kay. And then we kind of lost touch until our 50th reunion in 2000, because we graduated in the class of 1950. And at our 50th reunion, we kind of all connected again. And by then, long before then, my brother had graduated from UC Berkeley and worked for Livermore Lab, and he was a mechanical engineer, and he and his wife bought a house in Danville. And our family, Lori and I, my daughter and I, and my mother and aunt would come up here to visit them. And for Christmas and 4th of July, because his two kids' birthdays were in that same week as the 4th of July, and we'd go to the Danville 4th of July parade. And when we'd come up here, I would sometimes call some of the Pomona gals in the San Francisco area, and we'd get together for lunch. And we called each other the Sage Chicks. And that's because Pomona's mascot is Cecil the Sage Hen. We're sage hens. And our great football yell is chirp, chirp, chirp. And so we called each other the Sage Chicks. And that has lasted till this day. It's still going on. As we'd meet for lunch somewhere in the Bay Area. And when we did that over the years, and I moved up here in 2007, and I live in Walnut Creek, and we would get together more often until we began not driving anymore. And then the COVID pandemic came along, and we went on Zoom. And we've been meeting on the third Monday of every month for an hour and a half or so on Zoom ever since. And we've dwindled because last year most of us were 94 or 95, and this year I turn 95 next Wednesday, and Cathy had already had her 95th birthday in November. And so we've dwindled, and now there are just 4 of us that meet, two on the East Coast, one in Southern California, and me. And, well, there are a couple of other members of us up here. Sue Blaisdell lives in, well, her last name is Carroll now. She lives in Berkeley, but she doesn't often come because her husband had a stroke a few years ago and is having dementia, and she is busy taking care of him. And another member of our class lives in a skilled nursing facility near her son in Napa. And I got to visit her just a few weeks ago when Lori, my daughter, is a docent at the DeRosa Winery's art exhibit, and she took me up with her, and so I could visit Mary. Anyway, that's where we are. And all of us did things that helped our world. And we all lived up to the motto that's on the gates as you leave the campus at Pomona on College Avenue. The saying is, "They only are loyal who, on departing, bear their added riches in trust for mankind." And that's what we did. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I'd like to invite Marlene up.
Hello, I'm Marlene Miller, and my task is to talk about Cathy at work and at play at UCSF. I met Cathy in the mid-'80s when she had already transitioned from lab work to administrative computing. So all I know about her time at Proctor is that she said she got out of lab work when it was no longer fun. I doubt sincerely that Cathy thought that administrative computing was intrinsically more interesting than doing research, but it was fun in the early days. We were all making it up as we went along. And she did say, quite frankly, that she made the move to get a higher salary so that she'd get a better pension, and that indeed worked out very well for her. It was a smart decision. When Cathy joined Administrative Information Systems, as it was called then, it was a very small department with little internal structure, so work assignments were very fluid. People weren't physically located by what project they worked on. And originally, it was in MR4, which was a temporary building located behind the School of Dentistry up near Kirkham. And then in 1986, we were moved to 15th and Folsom, and were there when Cathy retired. I didn't actually work very closely with Cathy until the last couple of years before she retired. I don't know everything she worked on. The state of the art at that point was IBM batch mainframe with maybe, if you were lucky, an online front end to your batch system. She worked on the campus locator system, which was the underpinnings of the directory, alumni development, house staff, and later in student systems, admission, registration, financial aid. One big thing we did together was evaluating several student software packages. We didn't like any of them, but we didn't win that one. In the final year or so, before Cathy retired, the department was merged with Telecom, Computing Center, and maybe a few other things I've forgotten, so we became a big organization with meetings and bureaucracy and structure. Cathy was designated the manager of the Student Systems Group, and at that point, I started working for her, or with her, and she was the perfect boss for me. As long as the work was getting done, she didn't care how you went about it, and she would decide every so often that we needed to go out for ice cream immediately, and she would drive, and we'd go out for lunch, and she'd drive. And we always had time to talk about the latest episode of Masterpiece Theater and what novels we were reading and swap books back and forth. And she unintentionally introduced me to my favorite novelist. I'll tell you in the reception if you're interested. It's also in the nature of programming job that you spend a lot of time in single combat with the computer. Cathy was known for arguing with the computer. We all did, but maybe not quite as loudly. On the other hand, a good part of the job is to be able to work with the departments and the people you work with. So you have to be able to speak non-technically and understand what your clients needed and when they needed it. And sometimes you're working on something big enough that you're working with other programmers, and sometimes not, but you have to get along with them. Which is a long-winded way of saying that I can't think of anyone who didn't get along with Cathy. If she was displeased with someone, she never let it show in their presence, which does not mean that she was a pushover or that she was incapable of summing up very acidically after the fact. One time she came out of a meeting and described one of the participants who was not in our department as a short man in a brown suit. Cathy said, just as she got out of lab work when it was no longer fun, she retired just as computing was no longer fun. And what the not fun was about was partially the size of the department, the greater levels of management, increased overhead. Some of it was the implementation of stricter standards, which is not a bad thing in principle, but can be annoying if you're used to doing whatever you want. And we're also starting to get more different kinds of software, so there's a lot more stuff to learn. I was actually away from UCSF for part of 1987 and 89 when new managers were hired from outside. And from what I heard, more was going into overhead than into getting anything useful done. So Cathy, along with everyone else who was there at the time, gritted their teeth and somehow got through it. And I can imagine that Cathy had some choice words when the management was out of earshot. So in general, what I think Cathy brought to work, besides her intelligence, her good humor, her crankiness at times, was maturity and perspective, because she had worked at UCSF for a long time in another capacity. She did not have tunnel vision. Cathy and I stayed in touch after she retired. I know for a fact that I was still in the office and Loma Prieta hit after 5 p.m. because I'd been on the phone with her earlier that afternoon, and I probably didn't think I needed to make up the time, but there was probably something I wanted to get done. We sometimes meet for lunch or at her house, and every once in a while, as a special treat, she'd invite me to bring my dog to her house, which she enjoyed, and the dog enjoyed even more because her backyard is much more interesting than ours. And when we saw a lot more of each other after I retired and I had time on my hands, at some point, I don't remember when, I think it was before Cathy broke her leg the first time, I mentioned that a friend of mine who lives alone had an agreement with her family that she would check in by email every day so they know she was okay. So Cathy and I started emailing back and forth every day. And it very quickly went from, yeah, I'm still here, to what's for dinner, what are you doing, where are you going, did you see anything interesting, have you read any interesting, what plumber do you use, what roofer are you using, and so on and so on and so on. In fact, Cathy Chabatoni saw some of my last emails when I was sending emails into the ether because I didn't know that Cathy was hospitalized. Every so often, basically once a day or more, I think of something, see something, that I say, oh, I should tell Cathy about that, and then I can't.
I'd like to invite Nancy up.
Hello, I'm Nancy Evans, and I knew Cathy as we were both members here for many years. I did not know her better than many of you that are here, and I didn't know her differently because I think Cathy was the same person to all of us. I asked our wonderful photographer, Galen Workman, if he would provide a few photos of Cathy, which he did. They're in the order of service you received. But he said, I'm not sure I have one that captures Cathy's liveliness. And she was such a spirit. With her smarts, her tech skills, her training in science, the fact that she had overcome a serious illness, you would expect that Cathy might have been a serious person. But Cathy had a twinkle that put sugar and spice on everything she did. And Cathy did a lot. Reverend Margot has already shown how many activities Cathy participated in at the church. Cathy was never a spectator. And you've heard of the many groups that she belonged to and probably helped set up with her wonderful skills. I got better acquainted with Cathy when I was working here in the office for a few years, and Cathy would come in as the front desk receptionist. Not a powder puff job in an urban church with an open door policy, but Cathy was always up to the task. And in a silly moment, we discovered that we both shared a peculiar dislike for the tall palm tree that still grows on the corner of the church lot. And so in a silly moment, we devised a scheme for taking out this tree. Now, you can't really go and hire Joe with a chainsaw to drop a 100-foot tree across Franklin Street. And of course, if we had really been serious, doing this through proper channels would have required multiple committee meetings, the Board of Trustees, a congregational vote, and then there would be the planning department of San Francisco. Cathy and I, however, had a better plan. I was proud of a cordless Makita drill that I had acquired, and Cathy had a degree in chemistry. So we figured with enough discreet holes and Cathy concocting a poison potion, why, drop by drop, we would just melt this tree back into the sidewalk. Now, you will pass the tree as you leave. It's still here. But it was a fantasy thriller and really a good example of Cathy's playfulness. I moved out of San Francisco, actually, I guess it's been 15 years ago, hard to believe, and Cathy and I, a few other friends, stayed in touch through the occasional email and phone call. You've already heard Cathy was very good about staying in touch. And she followed me on Facebook, where I would post pictures of children and grandchildren and animals that she always responded to. So the day came when I had posted a particularly cute picture of one of our chickens, which Cathy loved, and she had not made a comment. And I realized she had not made a comment. A couple of phone calls, not responded to, and I alerted friends in San Francisco, and Reverend Allison Jacks hopped on her bicycle and pedaled up to do a home check on Cathy Lyon. Reverend Jacks was met by Barbara McGinley, Cathy's wonderful next-door neighbor, who explained that, in fact, Cathy had had a fall and was in the hospital with a broken leg. So I visited Cathy when she was in the Jewish Center in San Francisco, and after spending time with her there, realized how much I had lost not seeing her for so long. So I began to visit her, even though this was during the pandemic. And who visits a 90-year-old during the pandemic? We did it. She would greet me with a smile, make a cup of tea. We'd have lunch in her back room where there was a wonderful view of her yard. We'd talk about the birds and the flowers that were blooming. She would sometimes coax me into a Campari and soda. I had a Shirley Temple version, but she did a proper one for herself. And I heard about the webcams she was following and knew, of course, of some, although not all of the groups that she was engaged in. I also want to say that I learned how much Cathy's neighborhood meant to her. She had lived in that house for 45 years with the blessing of the same wonderful next-door neighbors, Barbara and Mike McGinley, with whom they'd chat over the back fence about art and San Francisco politics and PBS NewsHour. And she had many friends on the street where, even when she was getting along, she would take her chairlift down in the wheelchair through the garage, and there would be street parties on the street that she loved to participate in. So for her neighbors who are here today, Cathy loved all of you. I did not know Cathy better than anyone here, but I certainly learned from her. I learned that she lived in the present. She did not waste time wishing for the past or worrying about the next day. She did not live a small life, even though she was confined to the upstairs of her own home in her last couple of years. You've heard of all the groups she belonged to and her wide interests. She certainly showed me and proved that you can have a joyful life, even in limited circumstances, and I am so grateful that I got to spend that time with Cathy.
We've heard so many stories, so many times of people being with Cathy, learning from her, enjoying her. Now I want to put this into a kind of a wider context. So I'm going to read this reading, which is not my words entirely. They're words from many different people, but I've used them many times in memorial services. This is a richer universe than any of us dream. Through countless eons, the stars have rolled on in beautiful and undiminished speed, lighting we know not what other worlds. Here on Earth, the seasons have revolved for centuries, and Earth too has known her ice ages. Yet seeds have not failed. Life has survived. Richer for all that is past, and winter yields to spring with her priceless wealth of herb and flower. Loveliest of Earth's flowers is the undying spirit of humanity. It may be that beyond the seen there lies a still vaster, unseen world. Before the sublime mystery of life and spirit, the mystery of infinite space, of endless time, this universe of light and stars and mind, we must stand in reverent awe. This much we know. We are at least one phase of the immortality of life. Like flowers on the river's edge, we bud and bloom, unfold our season of usefulness and beauty, and scatter our treasures to the wind, bequeath our promise to the future. Meanwhile, the mighty stream of life flows on to infinite new beginnings, rich and increasing, of beauty and joy and love. And in this mighty stream, we too flow on, not lost, but each eternally significant. The path of life leads from our dawning until the setting sun, and each of us must walk that path, bring what it will until it ends. Some will walk narrowly, fearfully, and selfishly, but there are others who give of themselves fully, carrying with them a dedication to integrity, individual excellence, and beauty. Such a soul was Cathy. So much so that as we gather to remember her, we are powered first and foremost by the spirit of Cathy's life, the spirit of freedom, the spirit of adventure, the spirit of love. It is love's tribute we come to offer here today. And I invite you now for the next few moments just to think of Cathy in your heart and your mind, and we will be in silence for a minute or two, just while you have your own private thoughts about all that Cathy has given us. Amen and amen.
I offer this poem as closing words. Epitaph by Merritt Malloy. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you with something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people you've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live on your eyes and not your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that is left of me is love, give me away. All things must pass, and just as Catherine's life has come to an end, we come to the end of this service of memory and hope. We will now extinguish the chalice, which we earlier lit in her memory, and as I do so, I invite you to look closely. As the flame is extinguished, a puff of smoke will rise up, flow through this room, and out into the world, to be carried forth by eternal winds.